Hello, my name is Anthony Dang, and today I'm going to be talking about the current state of academic research into technical debt. So a little bit about me first. I currently am head of development for a fintech company. I am a certified Scrum Master, have certification in Agile leadership, at Umbraco, certified master, and Git ambassador and Umbraco MVP. So I've had a few positions where I've been able to be part of technical leadership. I've worked in companies and consulted for companies large and small, and I have an interest in software architecture and development processes and organizational systems and people. So let's start with a story. There is a company called Hertz, and they wanted to rebuild their website booking system, and they paid their supplier Accenture $32 million to build what's essentially a car rental booking system. So as part of this, the specifications involved some architecture, extensibility, responsiveness for a website. It needed to be secure and it needed to be tested. So of course, Accenture didn't do any of these, if you know about the story. And then they tried to charge an extra $10 million to essentially rectify these problems. So if anyone's a web developer, they'll know that if your website's not responsive when you build it, it's super difficult to actually wedge that in. And the fact that it wasn't tested, that's a big problem. So technical debt, according to Wikipedia, is the implied cost of additional work caused by choosing an easy solution now instead of a better approach that would have taken longer. I have a problem with this definition, and so does the research. So basically, this implies that you've chosen to do this. It was deliberate. You knew the impact. You had some intent, and well, okay. And then the better approach would have taken longer. Well, maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe it wouldn't have. So I would actually change this to be more like, okay, the implied cost of additional work. Now, when it comes to technical debt, Martin Fowler actually mentions these four kind of intents. So down the bottom left here, we have what is known as inadvertent and reckless. So basically, this is when your team or people are kind of clueless about what they're doing or what the problems might be. And up the top right here, it's prudent and purposeful. So basically, we understand what the consequences will be if we do this. We're going to it's a calculated kind of decision, and we're going to rectify this in the future. So that's where we want to be with technical debt. We want to know what the consequences are going to be, and yes, we are okay with this for now. So technical debt types. If you Google technical debt types, you will get a lot of different results, and it's not what the academic research actually says. So you'll get like 4 types of technical debt, 5 types of technical debt, 10 types, but actually in the research they categorize it a lot more. So we have requirements debt, so technical requirements, for instance, architectural debts, database debt. So database debt would be something like, maybe I haven't modeled my data properly. Maybe my database table is just a massive table where it should be multiple tables. Maybe I've been too granular. Maybe I have too many joins now because I've been too granular. Modeling and simulation debt, automation debt. So maybe my DevOps pipelines are convoluted, too many steps. Maybe I have some configuration debt. So So maybe I have some app settings which don't make sense, or maybe there's too many of them, maybe there's not enough, maybe there's some there that I don't remember what they do, and I'm just afraid to change them. Implementation debt, documentation debt, quality debt, integration debt. And these are just the ones that I've listed here for normal applications. If you talk about machine learning, well, then you have a whole bunch of other ones that have been introduced. So not only do machine learning applications and systems have the traditional amounts of technical debt, they also have these new types. So in the research, there's a lot of different types of technical debt out there, and a lot of different causes as well. So let's talk about these causes. In this one paper, they were looking at the maintainability of a system and architectural patterns. So what they wanted to know was, does the use of architectural patterns, design patterns, affect the maintainability of a system? And what they found was, it depends. So design pattern usage can be good, but actually if you implement them incorrectly or in the wrong scenario, then it can actually decrease maintainability. And an example of this might be because a design pattern is used because it's trendy, or you've used this design pattern in another project, and you thought, okay, I'll just use it in this project as well. So singletons, for instance, they were really trendy for a while, but everyone started using them, and then people realized, okay, this is not really a good idea. So this research paper also said that correct decisions at lower levels may also be required to deal with maintainability, but they didn't really get into what they mean by correct decisions and at lower levels. So in my opinion, a lot of these issues can be resolved by test-driven development or behavior-driven development. But again, it kind of depends, because TDD and BDD are tools, and if you use them in poor ways, then maybe you're going to have not the best results. But at the very least, you'll have something tested, right? So your architectural decisions can affect your technical debt, but do you know what these decisions are going to have in terms of impact? In this one paper, they named wrong assumptions as being a problem. They said that shallow architecture analysis due to agile and experimental approaches was a problem. Now, being an agile evangelist, and I'm a Scrum Master, and I've been working in agile for several years, I found this really, really interesting. Now, shallow architectural analysis due to agile experimental approaches. This says to me that they're not doing agile properly, because actually in Scrum, I would argue that you have more planning, better architectural analysis, because you build this into your rituals. So I found this quite interesting to actually read. They also mentioned lack of architectural skills, so that kind of makes sense. Lack of suitable technology alternatives. That's an interesting one, because I've worked in agencies and currently work for a product company, and we kind of make our technology, and if there's packages out there that we think are suitable, then we'll use them. So I found this one interesting. I did work for a company that chose a technology that they did not have specializations in, which brings me to the next point, software trends and oversales and sales overclaims. So basically choosing a technology because a salesperson told you to. Lack of support from a technology provider. So similar situation. You've been oversold some technology, and the support for that platform or framework just really is lacking, and your team isn't really really suited to maintain it. Also, lack of documentation and not considering the skills of the other software developers. So this one's an interesting one. Your team needs to be able to do the project. So this kind of says to me that maybe someone in the team chose a technology or chose an approach and just assumed that everyone would just learn it or be able to deal with it. So this next paper was dealing with code reuse or package reuse or library reuse. And what was really interesting is they found that code reuse actually increased technical debt and code smells. And this kind of sounds counterintuitive, but if you think about it, it basically means that, okay, if I've chosen to use this library, well, okay, if it's a massive library and I only use like one method, well, I've introduced quite a huge dependency. And if I've chosen to use a framework, but it's not necessarily the best framework to use, maybe I have to wedge it into my application. Maybe I have to write a whole bunch of code to make it work. And we call this glue code. So I have to glue all this stuff together, and maybe that's where the technical debt arises. So so they found that technical debt and code smells is actually correlated with the size of these components as well, which I found interesting. So the larger the code library or bit of code or package, the higher the probability that you're going to introduce technical debt. So let's talk about the factors in technical debt. So this was a really, really good paper. They identified 57 causes, which that's a lot of different causes. And the main categories they found were planning and management, lack of knowledge, methodology, organizational, people, documentation, external factors, and also design. So these numbers here are basically the responses in these surveys. So I just want to talk about the first two because these are obviously the ones with the most responses. Now, deadlines in terms of planning and management, that's an interesting one because, okay, we all understand that if you're under pressure, you may have to cut corners, maybe choose something that's not necessarily the best approach, but it's quick for now, okay? But if you had unlimited amounts of time, would you necessarily have a technical debt-free project? I would argue probably not, because you can always over-engineer things. You can always choose another approach. So if you had more time, would you choose the best approach? Well, it depends. It totally depends. When it comes to lack of knowledge, well, this was subcategorized as well. So lack of knowledge in general, interesting. So lack of maturity required to follow the process. That's an interesting one. So lack of maturity to follow the process. Lack of maturity of the team, of the people, personalities maybe. Lack of knowledge about the technology, lack of knowledge of the domain, lack of experience. So this is all kind of crossing over. In terms of the next categories, I'm not going to read through all of these, but what I would like to draw attention to is some things that stood out to me. So the word process and the word team pops up a lot. So this says to me, okay, company culture, organizational structure, team structure. Are you doing code reviews? Are you doing sharing? Are you knowledge sharing? Are you learning from each other? So just going to talk about technical, code smells at the moment. So smells are not necessarily just about code. There are all different types of smells, and like technical debt, there are lots of different types, like more than you thought of. So just going to name a few funny ones that are interesting. Inappropriate intimacy. Well, that's when two classes kind of know a little bit too much about each other. Primitive obsession. Refused bequest. Feature envy. Feature envy is when one class knows too much about the inner workings of another. Shotgun surgery. So basically, any type of change in one class has a cascading effect through multiple classes. In .NET, C#, there is a really cool technical debt tags package, which allows you to attribute interfaces and classes and methods. And I've introduced this in a couple teams, and it's actually quite nice because you can just say, okay, this is a code smell. What type of smell is it? And you can attribute this and look at this in the future and go, okay, well, here's all of our technical debt, like potential technical debt. Yeah, it's quite nice. So I highly recommend if you're coding in C#, download this tech debt tags NuGet package and just start tagging away. Because unless you tag your technical debt, you're probably not going to resolve it in the future. So talking about smells. So smells are not just to do with your code. There's this idea of community smells. So the idea of your team, your organization. In this study, they were looking at the communities of open source packages, open source projects. They saw that there are a few types of community smells, and I'm just going to name a few of them here. Prima donna is a pretty funny one. So it's basically condescending behavior, superiority, disagreement, uncooperativeness. So I think we've all seen this type of personality in teams, not necessarily firsthand, but we know this exists. There's a thing called black cloud. So this is an interesting one, which I think everyone's experienced. It's basically so many emails have swarmed around that you can't really find the information. It's just back and forth emails, group responses, and then at some point you're wondering, okay, where's the information? What was the objective? And then at some point you just give up on that email thread. Code red is an interesting one. This is basically when one or two devs know the solution. So this actually occurred in the Embraco projects several years ago. They were rebuilding Embraco from scratch, and they basically said, okay, you two developers, go for it, rebuild it. And that now that I know about this categorization of community smell called code red, it totally makes sense why that version of Embraco was not successful.
One slide back,
yes.
Someone asked about the package you were showing off of tech debt tags, and
yes.
Was that a GitHub project of techdebttags.net? Just to confirm.
Ooh,
I believe you had it in the footer of your slides.
Yes. So it's by James Taylor.
Yep.
Right. Tags. I will be sharing these slides later, so these will be available with all these links in the bottom left.
Okay, thanks very much.
So code red, and then there's Lone Wolf. So Lone Wolf is similar to code red. It is just a developer that works in isolation. So you have this same type of organizational team problem. Okay, so community smells and their causes. So in this study, they looked at types of issues. So okay, so long method, and they were looking at what correlates to these types of code smells. So they had code smells and their causes, and they found that a long method is correlated with these organizational silos and the black cloud. So that that constant email cloud. I actually found this one interesting because long method, in my opinion, is more about individual skills and attentiveness. I can't really see why an email bombardment or a lone developer working by themselves would be correlated with long method, unless that lone developer was not really being attentive, or just or maybe working late at night, for instance. Yeah, so that one was interesting. Feature envy and spaghetti code. So feature envy again is basically when a class knows too much about another class, and they found that yes, a lone wolf could be causing this. So I think this is something that I've seen before when you see a developer coding away and they don't really have any sharing of knowledge or bouncing ideas, so they end up with poorly structured code. So blob, which is basically you have a massive class that eats up all of your resources. This is correlated with bad communication and organizational silo and bottlenecks in your communications, and then the misplaced class, again organizational silo. So a lot of this is around poor communication and lack of asking other developers what they think of your approach. That's what this says to me. So technical debt prevention. So let's see what the research says about that. So straight into what it says. So as you might expect, it's essentially the inverse of the technical debt factors. So in this study, they were surveying developers and basically following a project plan, adopting good practices, well-defined requirements, creating tests. So that's a huge one. If you're not doing unit tests, please learn how to do unit tests, specifically test-driven development or behavior-driven development. It will save your life, makes programming so much more pleasant, and makes you actually more productive as a team if you actually learn how to do automated testing. So training, code evaluation, so essentially code reviews, following well-defined project processes. So say, for instance, if you're working in a Scrum team, for instance, risk and impact analysis. So that's basically planning and scoping. Well-defined architecture. So this comes down to, okay, are we going to use MVC? Are we going to use the mediator pattern? Are we going to use singletons everywhere? I hope not. You have to choose your architectural approach, and microservices is not the answer to everything. Sometimes you need to properly evaluate whether that architectural approach is going to be right for you. And of course, refactoring. So when you notice a problem, you should refactor it. So this paper was really interesting to me. This is about project managers who are handling technical debt, and the idea of this was they took a case study, and this company that they examined was dealing with technical debt tickets. So anytime there was tech debt which the team noticed, they would create a ticket, so like a Jira ticket or whatever project tool you're using. So, and in this company, the project manager explicitly owned the tech debt tickets because the tickets were treated as essentially defects or features. So the PM owns all these tickets, and the result was the team was actually more aware of what the technical debt was, because when you create a ticket and it's now cluttering up your Jira board, people start talking about this. So so you may have too many importance in your CSS. Well, that's right up there on your Jira board, and people talk about it, and people think, okay, maybe we should fix that, or what can we do to reduce that? So people started talking about alternative solutions, about how we can approach the project. And ultimately, because the tech debt was now visible for everyone, the team perceived that there was less technical debt because it was resolved. So if you were to ask me, like 5 years ago, what I would think if a project manager was owning the technical debt, I probably would have said to you, "Oh, that's a stupid idea. Project managers don't know anything about code or architecture. That's for the dev team. The dev team should own the tech debt." But actually, after reading this paper and actually implementing tech debt tickets in my current company, I've realized, hang on, no, the project manager or the product owner really owns the quality of the end product. And if the dev team creates 100 tech debt tickets and the product owner or project manager ignores them, well, their head is on the block. So so by putting all of these tech debt tickets in front of the project manager, they're not going to ignore these. Like yes, there will be some negotiation about the amount of effort to be put in, but in my opinion, if there's tech debt tickets, just dedicate an arbitrary 10% of your sprint to dealing with tech debt. So if you have 10 tickets in the sprint, well, one of them should be a tech debt ticket, and this will solve a lot of problems, and this will enable the product to be more stable, probably more better performing, and you'll end up with like lower maintenance costs ultimately. So this one was really interesting. Highly recommend technical debt tickets.
We have a question about
Yes.
do you find that feature slicing helps in terms of technical debt prevention compared to classic N-tier applications?
What
N-tier being like, if I'm not mistaken, physical separation of data layers, sort of like a multi-layer architecture.
So feature slicing, I'm guessing you mean like a vertical slice of a feature. So so quick answer is, in my experience, yes, and in Scrum they recommend this as well. So basically, in a Scrum team, you should have all the skills for the entire stack to do a feature. So if your feature is something like a search, well, okay, you need a front-end developer. You know, if I'm talking about a web application, so you need a front-end developer, maybe or maybe that front-end developer is a full stack person. Maybe you need someone that knows SQL, and maybe you need someone that can do some DevOps as well. And then if you get all those people communicating and they're in the same team, you should be able to get a better result rather than having siloed teams at every tier. So basically, some companies would have like a front-end team and a back-end team and a database administrator or database team. So that approach can work, but it involves a lot of really good communication between those teams. So in my experience, and in my opinion, if you have all those people in the same team, then you will get a lot more fluid communication and a better result. I hope that answered the question.
Thanks very much.
So we've talked about all of the, or not all of the current research, but the research that I've presented, and I just wanted to give a few of my personal opinions about all of this. So teams really need to be aware of what good and best practices are. So it's not good enough to say, well, you need to follow good practices. Well, okay, you need to know what those practices are, and those will change actually over time, depending on what's trendy and what technologies are out there. You also need to have some sort of business or strategy mind. So this doesn't need the entire team to be thinking this way, but definitely there should be someone in the team that is more business focused. So you can actually have like super technical people and more strategy people in the team. So your team needs to be also curious and flexible. So curious meaning, okay, I wonder what would happen if I do the code like this, or I wonder if we do an experiment, what the result is going to be. So basically, have a culture in your team that allows you to fail quickly and recover from it. And having a motivation to push boundaries. So there are a lot of trends out there, but you should be able to have a team that goes beyond those trends and maybe experiments and tries a new way of doing things. Maybe something that is novel for your company or novel for the community. And this one is really important. There needs to be someone in your team that can notice patterns and anti-patterns. So technical debt types, categorizations, well, these came about because people noticed some weird things in their code, and then people started thinking, okay, well, that's happened a lot. Okay, I'm going to give that a name. So there are likely technical debt types that have not been categorized yet. In the case of machine learning, these technical debt types emerged because machine learning was a new way of doing things. So people have noticed these weird patterns, and you really need someone in your team that has the type of mind. Okay, so in summary, planning processes and people are really important when it comes to technical debt, according to the research and in my personal experience. You really need a well-defined software development lifecycle. I am a Scrum master, so I highly recommend Scrum. It is a really lean framework and doesn't really prescribe too many overwhelming things. Basically, you have a handful of set meetings, and then you can do whatever you want. Skills and training, super important. So you obviously need to have a skilled team, but you also need to invest in their training. So test-driven development or behavior-driven development, this is super important. You need to be able to test what your code is doing, and when you have a test, your architecture will start to change. So what I mean by that is you can't just write tests for your code. You have to write code that is testable. So if you write your code first and then you try to write a unit test for it, well, maybe your code has a weird dependency and you can't write a unit test for it. So you really need to write your tests first so that you can understand how to architect your code. If you don't understand what I mean, look into TDD, and hopefully you'll start to understand that when you start writing these tests, the way you think about your architecture is going to change. Technical debt tickets. This is probably the biggest takeaway for me in all of this research. It's super helpful to just put all the technical debt in front of people. And if you're using Jira or any type of project planning tool like this, for every bit of technical debt, just create a ticket, and now it's plain in front of everyone to see, and then people will start talking about it. You also need to know what good looks like. So good practices, best practices, and you also have to have the motivation to do well. So your team needs to want to fix technical debt. They need to want to do good architecture. Okay, so that's the end of my talk. Thank you.
If you have any questions, please post them in the Discord. There'll be a bit of delay, so we might have to wait a few minutes for them to appear for us, for me speaking this. If you've got any feedback for this individual session, Miss Caitins in the Discord is posted in announcements a session feedback form, which if you're able to possibly show this on screen as well for those not in Discord, I've pasted it in the Teams chat. I'll show that link if possible. That's available. And is there any other information about you, like where can they find you and anything else?
Well, I'm on Twitter, so anthony.net. So also on LinkedIn. So yeah, just the usual places, I guess.
And as a reminder, unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, we won't be able to have a talk in or answer questions in the Discord after the session. Sorry about that. But if you've got any questions, I suppose you can ask Anthony yourself on Twitter.
And these slides will be available for anyone. So I guess I'll contact DDD and they'll distribute.
Okay, so as along with the video, we'll see about if we can have a link to the slides in the published video. Would you like this video published? I forgot to ask.
Probably, I guess.
We'll find out afterwards.
Yeah,
we'll see about yes, I can see some people are asking, very curious about some of the links in your slides, so we'll see about trying to get slides available to you for that.
So I can share this now with you, and you can post it on Discord.
Okay,
the,
I can
slides.
do that. Yep. I'll do that, and I'll post the slides in Discord. We got another thing from another question. The biggest problem I have in an agency is that it's not necessarily a case of the willingness of the team, but the willingness of the client to spend money on what they don't perceive as value. Have you faced this challenge, and how did you conquer it?
That's an interesting one. So clients, there's a few ways to get around this. One way is to just not tell the client, because like if you have technical debt, it's going to come back and bite you at some point. So you could just build this into your sprints or your routine, that at some point you're going to, during the sprint, do a bit of refactoring, like a day of refactoring, and just don't tell the client that you're going to do this. I mean, you shouldn't need to have to convince the client to give them a good quality product. Like that's just weird. If a client is wanting to know everything, you would have to educate them and say, look, the Hertz project cost $32 million, and in the end, it was unusable, and the company tried to charge an extra $10 million to fix these problems. Do you want your project to be the same? Well, that's an education piece.
I can also comment on that it's always a good idea to, any extra time you have left over in the sprint to dedicate towards tackling technical debt at the end is always a good thing.
Yeah, so yeah, a lot of teams won't have the time at the end of the sprint, because a lot of teams will get kind of pressure to wedge in as many things as possible, which is why tech debt tickets are really important, because you've now allocated time to do it. So I've been I've been in scenarios where we say, oh yeah, any time left over, we'll just deal with tech debt, and you actually end up overcommitting, and then you end up with potentially lower quality and more technical debt because you've decided to take on more tickets.
And I take it if you try to post the slides through Teams, there might be an issue with sharing it via a file.
Okay.
In which case you could, as a possibility, if you choose to, post it on Twitter, and then I could link your Twitter in the Discord if you'd prefer.
Okay. So let me try to create a link for this. 1 moment.
Another one is, I see it as part of the work. Do you quote differently for tests, or is it part of the work? I need a bit more phrasing there, I'm not sure.
So quoting for tests. So if I mean, the quick answer is no. Tests should be part of your day-to-day routine. But if a client is asking for a test as a requirement, then I mean that comes down to more of a billing discussion, I guess. But I think you should have tests as part of your routine, whether that's unit tests or end-to-end tests or Cypress, like a Cypress test, for instance. This is just more about you being confident that your code is not going to break anytime you change something. So yeah, basically no, don't quote the tests. Just do them, and change your billing if you need to. Increase your day rate, for instance, to cover that.
Right. I'll ask around and see if we can share your slides out with the session, possibly with the attendees, via DDD channels. Am I okay to link your Twitter if anyone would like to ask any questions later on?
Sorry, you broke up for a moment there.
My apologies. Am I okay to link your Twitter for anyone that has any questions later on?
Cannot hear you. I'm just going to paste in a Google Drive link.
Everything breaks at the end, it seems.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Where have you pasted this Google Drive link? Sorry.
I'll paste it in here.
I see it. And is that the slides? I'll paste that into the Discord for those that want it. Just test the link. Yep. Yeah. That's shared with them. Let's see. There's a question of, are you familiar with SonarQube? And if so, what is your opinion on it or of similar tools?
Yes. So SonarQube's quite good at it's a static code analysis tool. So it's definitely good at making people aware of the problems. Adding it to your workflow is probably the most difficult because many teams would, unless you have SonarQube as part of the project from the beginning, wedging it in later is going to cause a lot of disruption. So yes, I agree. This is something that you should use. It's also really good at finding security issues. So it can do like it can find SQL injection problems in your code, for instance. So yeah, I highly recommend something like SonarQube, but but it depends on kind of your team's maturity as well, because if you're presented with a lot of problems, a team may decide to just turn it off. But yeah, obviously that's not that's not ideal. Things like SonarQube, you need to have it at like when you're introducing it, you need to have it at a very low kind of threshold level, so that your team's not overwhelmed by by all the issues that it flags up. Otherwise, they will just say, "Oh, this is just like a flood of information. I'm just going to ignore it or turn it off."
Let's see. Is this a question? So we've got an example where someone's described their scenario of dealing with it. The example I'm referring to is a solution where code has been deprecated 3 times, so there's a lot of dead stuff. So we had a work stream to clear this up, but by itself, as it was seen as a no value by the client. Tech debt that is tackled as part of value delivery is generally not a problem. So it sounds like yeah, it was a case of persuading the client. It sounds like of the value of it.
Yeah, so that's again an interesting one. So in my experience, again, like your tech debt needs to be part of something that gives the client value. And like working in agencies, most of my my professional career, I found that it's best just not, like most of the time, it's best just not tell them. I mean, if you're doing some work for them, charge them for the work. That gives you value, gives them value. But during that time, buffer that out a little bit and then deal with the technical debt, because it's going to be good for the client and good for you as a company, and as developers, because you don't have to worry, or there's less worry about potential problems if you're doing regular cleanups. One other thing you could do is you could have a maintenance agreement. So for instance, one type of technical debt is due to not doing anything. So you could have a perfectly good project. Everyone could agree, yes, this is well architectured, it's very good code. But if you don't upgrade the packages regularly, or the dependencies, you accumulate technical debt. One of the technical debts that you may accumulate is security debt. So anyone that's dealt with NPM would have seen, okay, there's a JavaScript library that has a security problem. Okay, I need to upgrade all the dependencies now. So if you don't upgrade your dependencies, you're going to accumulate technical debt. So if you have a maintenance agreement with your client to make sure that all the libraries are up to date and that it's secure, so use the word secure with your client. Clients really like their applications to be secure. Then you should be able to buffer in some time to deal with code cleanup.
I guess we can see if we can wait for more questions. As a reminder, there is a session feedback form linked in the announcements of the Discord. If you could fill that in, a lot of the speakers find it highly useful. Of course, please be respectful when filling in the form. Seems the questions have slowed. I guess, would you like to wait a bit longer until the end? Because I know that you're not available to answer questions in the Discord, or would you like to wrap up?
I think if there's no more questions, we can probably just wrap up.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I've also got a clarification. If you post the hash number of your Eventbrite ticket in the Discord session, you'll be in a chance to win a NDC ticket.
Ooh, nice. NDC London, I see.
I believe so. I'm afraid I'm not 100% certain on that. The form can be found in the announcements. Hold on, let me. I'll link it in the chat as well. Let's see. A lot of people very interested in that NDC ticket, it seems. A lot of people very much liking the talk. Yeah, a lot of thanks and a lot of great talks. So they very much appreciated it.
Cool. Hope it was insightful. The technical debt tickets aspect of this was the biggest takeaway for me. Super useful.
Yes, I'll see if I can also persuade my team if they'd be interested in the technical debt attributes in .NET.
There's actually a couple of packages out there that this one is kind of the more thorough one, I guess. Also, because of all the different types of code smells that it names, it gets people curious about, oh, that's an interesting name for a code smell. I wonder what that is. So something like a inappropriate intimacy when two classes know too much about their inner workings.
I see another one here called Oddball Solution.
Yep. That's kind of related to the WTF attribute. Obviously, you don't have to learn about every single type of code smell, but it does get you thinking about what's going on in your projects.
Right, I think we're about ready to wrap up because the next set of sessions will be starting soon for those who are also attending those.
All right, great. Well, thanks, James. Good to see you in person one day.
Thanks everyone else for watching. Hope you all have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.